on? It is, thank you. Call the meeting to order, please. Could we close the back door? I'd appreciate it if we could do that. I'd like to start the meeting with an invocation, and to give the invocation this evening is Reverend Richard Black, representing Acton's religious community. Reverend Black.
Would you join me in a moment of prayer? Gracious God, we prayerfully request your presence among us as we come together in town meeting. Remind us that the choices we make will affect not only ourselves, but our families, our friends, our neighbors, and even those beyond this town of Acton. Help us then to choose regarding not simply our own good, but the common good. Help us to remember that we are all connected and part of a whole, and that none of us will find advantage by putting others at a disadvantage. Finally, O God, help us to make our choices looking beyond the bottom line of financial cost, but looking to the ultimate test of what is right. We pray on behalf of all of those who are gathered here. Amen.
Before we begin with the exciting list of articles that you have in front of you tonight, I'd like to recognize Doreen Hunter to make a short presentation. Doreen?
Mr. Moderator, as many of you, perhaps all of you know, Don Gilberti is retiring from the Board of Selectmen at the end of 3 very full terms, and after having suffered a great personal loss in the recent years. We are very much going to miss Don. I don't know anybody in town who knows as many people as Don does. At the Selectmen's meeting, I'm often at a loss for a name. I may remember the face or something, and I'll say, you, sir, or you, madam. And Don's always saying, that's so-and-so, and that's Mrs. Such-and-such. He knows everybody. And because of his interaction and his personal presence in town during the days, his involvement in the schools, he's been a particularly valuable selectman, and we're going to greatly miss him. In fact, we like Don so much, as you'll hear in a short while, we're going to try and defer the end of town meeting just so that we can extend Don's term for another 2 months. But seriously, we're going to greatly miss Don, and he is not going to drop out of town government. We've designated him as Acton representative of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. I'm sure he will continue to serve us in a magnificent manner in that regard, and we hope to see him often and frequent at Selectmen's meetings. And just as a token of our esteem for Don, we have a small thing here that we will present to him, not only in the name of the Board of Selectmen, but all of you. Thank you. Don said, should I open it now? And I said, yes.
It'd probably be appropriate to make a motion to limit Don's remarks to 30 seconds, I would guess. Oh, that's nice.
I'd like you to know this is a little bit smaller version of the State House clock, which cost $100,000. I thank you very much. Over 23 years, I've really had the pleasure of working with a lot of people, meeting an awful lot of people, and all I can say is thank you.
think we have a number of young people sitting down here in the audience. If I'm not mistaken, you are Boy Scouts from Troop 11, is that correct? That's right? Good. Glad to have you here. Don't talk too much, but we're delighted to have you here. I'd like to introduce the people at the two tables here. Some of you may not know all of them, so I would ask Doreen Hunter to introduce the people at the Select Persons table.
Fortunately, I can do this without Don's help. There's Bill Weeks on the far right, Norm Lake, Don Gilberti, I'm DeRay Hunter, Nancy Tavernier, Don Johnson, the town manager, Mike Callahan, town council, and the moderator usually gets to introduce this nice lady.
Well, that is Connie Huber, the town clerk, as you all know. How about the people that are sort of sitting in the back? Do we want to introduce them? Nah. Okay, go ahead.
By all means, Roy Weatherby, our financial director, John Murray, our assistant town manager, and Ken James,
Great.
assistant finance director. I did need a little help.
I would ask Mike Rogers to introduce the members of the Finance Committee. Mike?
Yes, thank you. The members of the Finance Committee are to my left, Dr. Mary Donald, Art Harrigan, Joe Peters, Bill Mullen, Paul Kohout, Sandy Sanford, and Chip Aguil.
We probably could apologize to Paul because his name was spelled incorrectly. His first name was P-U-A-L in the warrant. That is not a testimony to anything other than misspelling, right? Okay. Before we get into the articles, let me ask a couple of questions. Is anybody here at town meeting for the first time? Are there any first-time people here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Few of you. Well, let me just review a couple of rules then of running town meeting, and I would encourage you, if you haven't been here before, to participate in the process. It's easy to speak. It's easy, certainly, to second motions. That's a good way to get started. I'd like to indicate that what you vote on at town meeting is the motion that is read, and mostly it will be read by me. It is not the article unless the motion simply refers to the article. So you're voting on the motion as read, which may be somewhat different from the article, but certainly within the scope of the article. After motions are read, they are seconded, and then the mover of the article, the one whose name is mentioned as I read the motion, gets to speak to that article, and after that you will normally hear one or two boards commenting on it. The Board of Selectmen comments on it, and if it's an article dealing with finances, certainly the Finance Committee comments on it, and then it's open for discussion among the people, the town meeting members. When you are discussing it, I would appreciate it if you would go to the various microphones that are around the auditorium. There are 4 or 5 of them. There are some in the front. There's at least one in the back. Yeah, there's 2 in the back. And stand there, hopefully patiently, and I will try to pretty much rotate around the room. It works out pretty well that way. If you feel that the first time you've spoken you haven't made your point, you may speak twice to the same motion, but we would like people to, all first-time speakers, to speak first before someone speaks a second time. There are some exceptions to that, and that is, of course, primarily the boards. The board generally takes a pro or a con position to an article, and they really should do that once. But they often will get involved in answering questions. So they may speak multiple times, but it shouldn't be other than to answer a question, not an advocacy position, pro or con. I would ask when you're asking a series of questions, if there are a series, that you tell us there are a series, and that you ask all questions be directed through the moderator, as opposed to asking the question of the board directly and having the board answer you directly. I would like to be involved in recognizing people prior to their speaking. When you're speaking, I would ask you to speak to the article or speak to the amendment. Try to stay on the point if you can, and try to add something new. I would ask you, when you're speaking, not to just reiterate if you can help it, that which 2 or 3 other people have said, but try to add something new. When we come to vote on an article, we generally vote when no one else is standing to speak. On the other hand, someone may move the previous question, which, as you know, cuts off debate, or when I generally think it's ready to be voted upon, which is mostly when people have finished standing and speaking. We'll take the vote first by voice, and if we can't tell then which side has prevailed, we will take it standing. And then if we can't tell from that, we'll have the tellers come forward and count the vote. I would ask that you don't make amendments to amendments. Not that it is illegal or anything wrong with that, it's just very confusing. So I would ask you not to make amendments to amendments. I would ask you to show courtesy and respect for each other's positions. And if you are not in tune with the speaker, you remain silent while they finish their talk, and then you may have your turn. The door should be closed prior to voting. It's very difficult to take a vote, particularly a standing vote or a telecount, if people are walking in and out, so we try to keep the door closed. And finally, the cardinal rule, the one that I would really like people to remember more than anything else, and that is not to turn the viewgraph on when I'm standing here with my eyes open. No sneaking up to it and flipping the switch as you go by. I would appreciate it. I think with that, we're ready to begin. I'm going to ask you to pay special attention to the first couple of motions, because they are a little bit confusing and they're not the way we generally start town meeting, but we're going to move to postpone some articles, and there's a number of them, so if you've got a pencil, you may want to write them down. Wait a minute. All right, we'll move to the first article that we will vote on. It is not Article 1. Mr. Hunter moves to take up Articles 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 34, 37, and Article 38 in numerical order at an adjourned session of the annual town meeting at 7:30 p.m. on June 4th, 1991, at the Acton Boxborough Regional High School Auditorium, and that there be a second call of the consent calendar on Articles 10, 11, 12, and Article 34 at the adjourned session. Do I hear a second? Second. Mr. Hunter, to your motion.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you're all aware, I'm sure, this is a very unusual thing that we're asking you to do. Basically, we find ourselves in a very uncertain situation in regard to finances, that is, revenue and income, particularly revenue that we can look forward to getting from the state. We expect a certain degree of uncertainty in early April, but not the degree of uncertainty that we have this year. The last year or two have been very uncertain years, but this year is even worse. We do not know, and it is a changing scene daily, as to what the level of financial aid we will get from the state for the next fiscal year, for FY92. We also do not know, finally, what local aid we will get for the current year, FY91, when we're supposed to get a payment in June. Those two matters are under fierce debate on Beacon Hill, and we normally have had a cherry sheet by now, but what we have is a forecast of the cherry sheet, and the forecast of the cherry sheet didn't even forecast all of the items on it. In addition, as we talked about at the special town meeting in the fall, local revenues are down. We are not certain how far they are going to be down for the year, and additional time to determine that will better enable us to know where we are. And finally, we're engaged in negotiations, or have been engaged in negotiations with all our labor unions this year. Now, the school teachers have settled, but the others have not. We could probably deal with some intelligent assumptions on any one of these variables, or perhaps two of the variables. But having put together all four of the variables at this point, we simply, and I say we in the sense of the coordinating committee composed of representatives of the four major boards, and the boards themselves, the Board of Selectmen, the two school committees, and the Finance Committee, simply are sufficiently uncertain that the revenue assumptions on which we base the third year of our three-year financial plan, and on which we base the $1.2 million override, which the voters very graciously voted here just the other day, those revenue assumptions may no longer be valid. They may be valid. We simply do not know. We have also were advised some time ago that because of the discussions going on in regard to school regionalization, there would be the necessity to have a special town meeting in very early June. So we looked downstream to that and said, why not put off the raise and appropriate articles until the beginning of June, when we are going to have to be back in this hall anyway? And certainly by then, the fog over Beacon Hill may have parted to some degree, and we at least will know better about what our local revenue is, and we may know more about the course of negotiations, which may impact staffing levels. So the motion that the moderator has read, which has been the subject of considerable legal and parliamentary study, is intended to put off until June 4th at 7:30, when we'll meet, and then probably immediately adjourn into the special, because we promised the schools we would deal with regionalization first that night and then come back to the budget articles, all the raise and appropriate articles. Now, you will note, if you look down your list, we are not proposing to delay the enterprise fund articles 4 through 7, which we will address either through consent or otherwise tonight. That is because, with the exception of the Neswick article, all of the enterprise money is raised by those activities. And Neswick is a somewhat of an odd case, because part of that money is raised and appropriated on the tax base, but since it's an outside contract, we essentially have to spend the money anyway. So there's no reason not to get to that tonight. The motion as read would divide the consent calendar. We will do consent tonight following this motion sometime if approved, and do the consent on the deferred items at the beginning of the deliberations on the budget on June 4. I would submit there's nothing untoward about this. Other towns have postponed budget deliberations. We certainly haven't done before in my memory, but nevertheless, we don't propose to neglect the budget altogether tonight. We have put our heads together and decided, with the moderator's blessing, that if you agree to postpone the debate and the vote on the budget articles, that following Article 2, and nevertheless, the Finance Committee, the two school committees, and the Board of Selectmen will give you brief, ladies and gentlemen, brief status reports on the budget, largely the proposed expenditure side, as it stands at this point, so that you'll know where we are, but we would then move on and not reach those articles until June the 4th, at which time, of course, you would get a normal full presentation overview from the Finance Committee, the normal full presentations from the other three boards, and have the normal deliberation and vote. We would appreciate it if you would vote affirmatively on this motion, so that we can stand before you to discuss the warp and woof of the budget with a little better grasp of what's going on in the state. Thank you.
Finance Committee?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, we are in agreement with this motion. We just don't have enough hard information as to what our funding level will be from the state. The state funding is far too high a percentage of our budget to ignore that uncertainty, and we just don't have the planning assumptions to go forward. So rather than lock ourselves in right now, we would prefer to wait a month or so to see how things shake out.
Comment? Seeing nobody standing, we will vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move now to the consent calendar. This was something, as you know, that we've been doing, or is something that we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. And we will present to you a number of articles which will be passed with your approval without debate. I will read the articles that are on the consent calendar, those that haven't been postponed, such as 10, 11, 12, and 34. And if any of you would like to put those back in normal order and debate them, just yell out hold. It will take 2 people to hold an article. So I will now go read the motion because there's one change on Article 6. Mr. Hunter moves that the town take up the 18 remaining articles as listed in the consent calendar on pages 11, 12, and 13 of the warrant, except that in Article 6, Mrs. Tavernier moves that the town raise and appropriate a sum of $885,000 for the purpose of solid waste disposal, and that the receipts from the fees generated by providing such services be set aside as a separate fund to meet this appropriation. Now, I will read the articles, and if you wish to hold any of them, please holler out. Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, dealing with the septage disposal enterprise budget. Article 6, dealing with the NESW enterprise budget. Article 7. Article 18. Let me go back to Article 7 again. Article 7? Okay, thank you. 18 has been held. Article 19. Article 20. Article 21. Article 22, dealing with nursing homes. Article 24, Quarry Road land use change. Article 25, Stony Mead land gift. Article 26, Cunningham land gift. Article 27, Prescott Paint land gift. Article 28, enhanced. Article 28. Article 29, regional fire and EMS dispatch. Article 35, continuation of previous appropriations. Article 36, tax anticipation notes. We've held Articles 7, 18, and 28. We will now vote. All in favor of passing the consent calendar as read, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Consent calendar has passed unanimously with the exception of Articles 7, 18, and 28. I think we're ready to move to Article 1. Do we have someone who's going to make a presentation at this point in time? Yes. Prior to anyone speaking, it would be helpful if in the audience, when you got up, you stated your name and street before you speak. Thank you. Betty.
I'm Barbara Tornstrom from Central Street, and I wanted to say on behalf of the parent-teacher student organizations at Acton Boxborough High School, Junior High, Blanchard Memorial Elementary in Boxborough, Conant, Douglas, Gates, and McCarthy Town, We wanted to express a heartfelt thank you to the Acton Boxborough residents for the recent Donaldson's Computer for Kids fundraiser. The community effort was truly moving since support came not just from parents of school-age children, but also residents without children. Collection boxes were placed at the Acton Center Congregational Church, Sargent Library in Boxborough, and Windsor Green, with receipts being distributed equally among the 7 schools. At a time when monies are limited for supplies, we were able to acquire computer, printers, software, VCR, and TV monitor for our schools. And I'd just like to say on a personal note, this type of community support reinforces my already positive feelings about the town. Thank you.
See, there was no reason to be nervous at all. We move now to Article 1. There are 6 votes under Article 1 that are needed. We'll take up the first vote. Mr. Hunter moves that the town fix the compensation for elected officers as shown in the warrant. Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any comment from Mr. Hunter? Comment from the Finance Committee? No comment. No one standing. We'll vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. We now have some nominations to committees. Nominations to committees do not need seconds. Malcolm McGregor nominates Edward Bennett as trustee of the West Acton Firemen's Relief Fund, term to expire in 1994. Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, nominations are closed. All in favor of Edward Bennett as trustee of the West Acton Firemen's Relief Fund, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Walter Sprague nominates Alan Nelson as trustee of Acton's Firemen's Relief Fund, term to expire in 1994, and William Clower as trustee of Acton Firemen's Relief Fund, term to expire in 1993. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we will vote. All in favor of Alan Nelson and William Clower as trustees of the Acton Firemen's Relief Fund, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Francis Moretti nominates Mabel Grecola as trustee of the Charlotte Goodnow Fund, term to expire in 1991, and Shirley Toll as trustee of the Charlotte Goodnow Fund, term to expire in 1993. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor of Mabel Grecola and Shirley Toll as trustees of the Charlotte Goodnow Fund, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Cornelia Huber nominates Edwin Miller as trustee of the Elizabeth White Fund, term to expire in 1994. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor of Edwin Miller as trustee of the Elizabeth White Fund, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. And the last vote under Article 1, Francis Bissell nominates Virginia Hahn as trustee of the Citizens Library Association of West Acton, term to expire in 1994. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor of Virginia Hahn as trustee of the Citizens Library Association of West Acton, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move now to Article 2. Mr. Gilberti moves that the town accept the reports of the various town officers and boards as set forth in the 1990 town report, and that the moderator call for other reports. I will do that after we take the first vote. Do I hear a second? Mr. Gilberti?
We support your supporting this motion.
Mr. Gil.
The Finance Committee recommends approval of this article.
Yes.
Dennis Ahern, 298 Central Street. I just want to make sure there's a clear understanding of the use of asterisks in the report of the town clerk on elected town officials and appointed town officials. There seems to be some discrepancy. Sometimes one asterisk is used and some two to indicate deceased. And my name seems to indicate that I am deceased. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear in the report.
Normally, I never let something like that pass, but...
We get the vote?
Are there any other cogent comments? Obviously, Mr. Ahern is alive. See no one standing, we will vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. Are there any other reports to be given other than those that were in the town report? There seem to be none, so we will now move to the budget presentations, as Mr. Hunter indicated, which would come after Article 2, I believe. I think we will... Mr. Rogers.
Look at the switch.
It's on now, I think. Nope. Have you turned this mic on? The mic is on?
Oh, it is on. Okay.
Right.
Good evening. Before we get into the numbers, I just want to make a quick comment that this is my third year involved with the Finance Committee in the town of Acton, and I'll tell you, you've been reading a lot in the newspaper about our ad hoc process, and I've been going to meetings of our regional FinCom board where we get together with FinCom members of other towns. I want to tell you, we are the citizens of Acton are much better served in the trade-off between cost control and tax rate by this process. It's really worked for us in a very difficult environment. I'm pleased that we're not going to be voting on the budget tonight because it's just too much of there's just too much uncertainty with so much of our budget being up in the air. The state comes in for something like $4 million, $3 million of our funding, and on a $29 million budget, that's just $31 million budget, excuse me, that's just too much uncertainty. Second of all, we wanted to hold off our annual FinCom budget review until we did have these facts in front of us so that we would know that we weren't funding projects that we had no hope of, that would be imprudent to fund once we got hit with a low number from the state. Nonetheless, we did want to give you an update as to where we think we are in this year's budget process. Obviously, the thing we have to explain to you tonight is very simple. We see in these changes here from 1991 to 1992, we see our total budget going up 1.6%, and we see our tax levy going up 7.5%. And you might look at that and say, what's going on here? And that's a good question. This has been a very difficult time for many of us in the community. Certainly, I've taken my pay cut. Many people have lost their jobs. We look around our neighborhood and we see it's been very, very difficult for many of us. Yet the FinCom feels that this is a very good budget. I feel the ad hoc process has worked, and it has, again, it's been sensitive to the trade-off between a delivery of services and the maintaining of efficiency. I think that the following slides will explain to you in very plain English why this is so. I'd like to break up my very brief presentation in 2 slides, one showing cost trends in the town and one showing revenue trends. These are the aggregate budgets of our town and school. Basically, you see, starting out with the Acton schools, by the way, the total budget I didn't put in, that's millions of dollars, 17.3, 18.6, 19.3, and 20 million. And below that is the percentage change from the year before. Basically, what you see is a trend, and we didn't fill in the percentage change in 1989, but it was certainly, I believe it was in the range of 7 or 8%. You see increases as our economy was growing and state funding kept on growing. We kept on merrily growing our budget along at a rate which is somewhat in excess of inflation, and then when we started hitting budgetary constraints, we quickly put on the brakes and started knocking down the annual increases, in the case of this year to 3.5%, and in the case of next year's proposed budget, 3.7%. The solution, however, to get to the softening of spending, slowing down of spending, has changed somewhat. Last year, in the last 2 years, 1990 and 91, we had reductions in staff. You see that line item below, percentage change on the budget, it says FTEs. What that stands for is full-time equivalents. It's or the equivalent of 40-hour employees. Basically, you see that number grew. If you go back through 1985, 1984, the number of employees in the system grew steadily until 1989, and then we started taking it down. To the point where in 1990 we had a 1.9% reduction in staff in the schools, and in 1990 was a not 1.9% reduction in staff, 91 was 4.4%. We decided in our strategy this year in getting through this very difficult year was to say that we thought that if we were going to ask people to increase their taxes, we didn't want, in this very difficult year, we wanted to deliver more value. So we have worked to get the town and the schools to work on level funding the salary budgets, and fortunately, the teachers have already agreed to do this, and I think we should all in the town be very grateful for that. It was a very good thing for the town. It's just difficult. We didn't want to stand in front of you when people in our neighborhoods are taking pay cuts and losing their jobs. We thought it was a pretty good deal to maintain a level funding of these budgets, and on one hand, but on the other hand, at least the people who get the same salary next year as this year have a pretty good guarantee of keeping their job. So we thought delivering more value for the dollar was the way to go. The reason we have to focus on the personnel budgets when we're having trouble is that that's where the money is. 80% of our tax spending is personnel related. And if you're not going to confront that, you're not going to balance your budget. So that's why there was really no way around this. Everything else beside that is a sideshow as far as financial planning is concerned. When you get down to the municipal side, you'll see likewise a 10.3% decline in FTEs in 1990, followed by a 10% decline in the budget in 1990, followed by 2 very moderate increases, certainly well below inflation, of 2.1 and 1.8% in 91 and 92 respectively. And you'll see the oh, can you, how's that?
Keep going, Mike.
I'm not paid to do this, you know. How's that? Okay? Okay. Okay, thank you. So basically you see that the budget numbers were reduced, the total expenditures were reduced 10.9%. Now I lost my year. Okay. Can you see that? Okay. We reduced our spending by 10.3% in 90, and increased it moderately 2.1% in 91 and 1.8% in 92, certainly well below inflation. The strategy on the town side to control costs was much as mirrored the schools because it's all part of the overall ad hoc process. And that resulted in a 1% reduction of staff in 90 and an 8.9% reduction in staff in 91. Again, we didn't feel that it was fair to go back to the town and take less service this year because of what's going on in the economy, and we pursued the same procedure for reducing costs, which is to level fund the salary budget. This is all well and fine, but the next question that we had to confront is this. It's great to see year-to-year cost containments, but what if there's a lot of inefficiency built into the system? In other words, what if the base was rotten, and so you're dealing inefficient, and you're not pushing hard enough to get it down? Again, these are questions we're sensitive to. You have to ask these questions because there's just less money on the table, and we have to be as efficient as possible. We've done research both on the town and the school side, and consistently, you've been seeing this stuff for years, you'll find that our average spending per pupil is very competitive in the Commonwealth and certainly lower than most towns that we consider ourselves competitive with, whatever that means. And second of all, if you go to the municipal side, and this doesn't get very much as much publicity, if you go to the municipal side, and you look at our spending per capita, for fire services, for police, for general administration, and lump it all together, you'll find that our town is very, very competitive on an efficiency basis with other towns in the Commonwealth. So if spending isn't the problem, what is? Okay. It's very simple. Look at the state aid line. 1990, we got $4.4 million from the state. This is for both the town and the school. 91, $4.3 million. 92, $3.9 million. Not only as our budgets have increased, not only have those budgets not kept up with the increases in our, that state funding not kept up with our increases in spending, because if it had, that $4.4 million probably would have grown to $5 million by now. It's down to $3.9 million. On an inflation-adjusted basis, that's $1.1 million, or 3% of our budget right there to make up. In addition to that, and let me backtrack a little bit, the problem we have now is that we're not even sure how hard that $3.9 million is. And that's an awful lot of money to make up. I also, well, let me move on to motor vehicle expense revenues. Look at that, 1.3 million in 91, 1.2 million, I'm sorry, 90, 1.2 million in 91, and 900,000 in 92. That's another 400,000 to make up in 2 years. Fees have declined similarly from 1.2 million, and I believe that that's a typo on it goes, that should be 1 million. So we've lost another 200,000 there. Now, can you see the bottom all right? No? All right? Okay. Okay, the other thing that in the past, when we had a budget deficit, we could always make it up by reaching our hand into the cookie jar. We can't do that this year. We started out the end of 90 with a free cash. We've taken free cash down consistently for 5 or 6 years, probably more. I haven't gone back that far on the numbers. But if our free cash balance in 1990 was $1 million, this year we took it down to $300,000, and 92 we're going to take it down to $200,000, or take it. We're going to have which implies a transfer of 100,000. Obviously, so two major unsustainable sources for funding our spending in the last 5 or 6 years. And that's what we have to confront in the 92 budget. They are, most importantly, a decline of state funding which on an inflation-adjusted basis is we've lost $1 million. And I might add something interesting. If you were to look at the money we expect under this best case from the state of $3.9 million and went back on an inflation-adjusted basis, you would find that the amount of money we're getting this year is roughly what the town received from the state the year Proposition 2.5 was passed. The reason we have to increase taxes 7.5% this year is that the state was funding the town government, the town of Acton's government, with money it didn't have. And we've got to get even and balance our budget without them from now on. Second of all, if you look at, on top of that, you've got the loss of $800,000 of subsidy over the last 2 years. So, in summary, we don't believe we have a cost problem in the town of Acton. The problem we have is plugging the holes of major source of revenue that are drying up. And we've tried in our planning process, I think, to be sensitive to these trade-offs, and we're very pleased with what we came up with. And I'll quickly just add a couple of other notes. One of the concerns I've heard people register is that in this ad hoc process, the Finance Committee has been letting people off the hook, so to speak, not getting so much involved with line item detail. Rather than go into a lot of, I don't have much more time, and rather than go into any more detail, I just mentioned that is not the case. We still are looking at line item detail. We've gotten involved with the ambulance situation, pensions, working with the Board of Selectmen in the town and the schools to review legal budgets, and looking forward to next year. I think that the next improvement we have to make in the financial planning process of the town is to come up with a more efficient way of doing financial analysis on planning and zoning articles. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Are we now going to have a similar presentation from the school committee? Sure. All right. Lee and
I promise I'll be very brief. This is a budget presentation by the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee. Brief overview of the presentation. As you came in, there were budget packets. If you didn't get them, you can get them on your way out. There's much more detail in those than I will be presenting or Pam will be presenting. So you can look in that and get more information. I have one brag slide. I promised Dory I would just do one. Then we have the 91-92 budget, the factors that are causing the change in the budgets, the relative positions of the regional schools with other schools that we compare ourselves to, and briefly a summary. This is my brag slide, and I know you all have been following in the papers all the things that have been happening at the high school and the junior high, but I would really like to just run through them for you, perhaps one more time and perhaps for the first time. Our academic decathlon, which has only been going 2 years, was second in the state. The boys gymnastics team, which was just started this year, came in as state champions. The speech and debate team are state champions again, first year. Boys swim team for the 4th consecutive year is state champions. Our jazz band got an outstanding band award, and 4 students got outstanding soloist awards. Girls gymnastics team were the DCL champs and came in 7th in the state. The high school play was in the state finals. The boys basketball was in the Eastern Mass finals and Division I North champs. Math team, Eastern Mass champs. Ray Gray junior high school fall sports, all teams undefeated. And when I saw that, I said, all the teams? And they said, all the teams. High school music students, 6 students performed in the Mass All-State Music Festival this year. We have quite a bit to be proud of. Some brief summary of the budget that we have established for next year and will be asking you to vote on an assessment for on June 4th or 5th, whenever. The proposed aid budget has 3 major assumptions in the coordinating committee process. We made these assumptions. First of all, the salary line item was frozen at FY90 level. Now, all of you must know at this point that our teachers union made a big step in helping us maintain the quality of our educational system for another year, in that they agreed to take no increases, no steps, no increases. And this was really a tremendous help to us all in our effort to keep our children well educated. The Acton override passed with 63% of the vote, and I thank you all. Again, that was an effort, and it will help us maintain our schools at the present excellent level. The last assumption was level funding of state aid. As you all know, we have no idea, which is why we're postponing the actual vote on this assessment until June. Most of the line items in the budget were level funded, with the exception of health insurance, special education tuitions, and utilities. These are the budget busters. 90-91 budget, $11,123,722. Health insurance, as you see, is going up about $250,000. Utilities going up about $100,000. Sped tuition and transportation about $74,000. All other categories have been decreased by $48,000. The proposed budget is $11,499,343. That's up 3.4%. Briefly on the health insurance, this is what it looks like. That slide is in your packet, and that is what's been happening to the health insurance costs over the last few years. Our per pupil expenditures are being maintained at a relatively low level compared to other school systems to which we compare ourselves. These are 16 school systems that we feel are relatively comparable and are geographically close. As you see, our per pupil expenditures are number 16. Our test scores are number 4. Briefly, I would like to thank the staff for their commitment to excellence in education, the students for their excellent participation in our schools, the parents for their wonderful support, and the community at large for supporting the override and showing continuing support for education. In summary, one more time, health costs, special ed tuition, and utilities are increasing. The proposed budget ensures that we continue to maintain educational quality while controlling costs. We ask you to support our budget of $11,499,343 when it comes up.
Promising to keep this to 5 minutes. We'll follow, keeping in mind we're not voting on this budget. This is the Acton budget for the Acton Public Schools for 90-91. There'll be a budget 1991-92 budget, the factors that are causing the change, the relative position of our per pupil expenditures in the elementary level, and a quick summary. To continue our philosophy of maintaining our same relative position with equal or greater quality results. This is our relative position since 1985, where we've always been somewhere toward the bottom, although our educational test scores are among the top in the state, our per pupil expenditures remain quite low. The budget busters are very similar for the region and for the elementary level. Our health insurance costs, our utilities, our sped tuition and transportation, and all other categories, including salaries. Our proposed budget for the Acton Public Schools is $8,524,151, up 4.2%. And again, as in the region, we froze our salaries thanks to our spectacular professional staff of teachers. The override passed. Thank you all again. We have no idea what the governor's going to do in terms of state aid. And unfortunately, our health insurance, our sped tuitions, and our utilities, we have no control over. And in summary, our health insurance costs, these are our unfixed costs. Our proposed budget ensures that we continue to maintain educational quality while controlling costs. We'll be back in June for the final budget vote. We ask for your continued support. And again, thanks to the staff and the students and the parents and the total Acton community for continuing their support, keeping Acton Boxborough school system the best. Thank you.
And I will continue, if I may, with a brief status in regard to the municipal budget. The philosophy of the municipal budgeting for the last several years is to maximize services and retreat. It was fiscal 90 was the year that the state aid started to go, and it was also, as a result, the beginning of the coordinating process. And you can see here that in fiscal 90, for the municipal portion of the budget, we were actually down 10%, and now back up 2% this year, and are projecting on the assumptions as we know them as we stand tonight, 1.84% for the next year. So you can see the trend. The coordinating process has been entirely necessary and is what sets Acton apart in how we're managing these fiscal times. We have taken reductions in the municipal side, and we have attempted to take those reductions in a way that will preserve emergency services. So you'll see that from fiscal year 8, compared to fiscal year 89, full-time equivalents to where we stand now, projecting for next year, assuming union negotiations with a zero increase in the bottom line of wages, that we don't have to lay people off in that regard, we will have taken our largest cuts at 11 and 10% in the town hall and libraries and 8% in highway, whereas we've held the cuts in the full-time equivalent in the police department, the fire department, to under 3%. Well, you've heard a good bit about the idea of zero salary raise for the employees this year. And what we've essentially done was said that the only way we thought we could budget this year through this coordinated process was that we spend the same amount of money next year on personnel costs as we are this year. And that means if we're unable to achieve a 0% wage increase in negotiations, if we have to take some higher percentage, then we'll simply have to lay people off to come out with zero. But we're hoping not to do that. And why we come to that is if you look at these columns for typical full-time cost employees on the municipal side, the entire extent of the column is the entire cost of the town. And you'll see it's rising at a slope that looks fairly typical to wage increases from year to year. But as you all know, health insurance costs have been exploding. That's the red increment on top. And you'll see here between 90 and 91, even if we hold the typical salary for this typical full-time equivalent employee at the same level, the increase in the health insurance costs will just essentially fare that curve. So that we decided finally that the only way we could get through another year and hopefully, who knows, maybe turn the corner, was ask our employees for a zero wage increase this year. The extent to which this budget is driven by health is shown here on this slide. Here, we have assumed zero increase in salaries, and we still are looking at between about $275,000 on the municipal side increase in health insurance. The next biggest cost is the increase in Neswick. We'll get hopefully shortly, well, I guess we passed that on consent. The Neswick Enterprise Fund is not fully self-funding because if we were to charge you the full cost to the town to put stuff in a transfer station, we're charging $60 now, for which I get a lot of phone calls. The full cost would be something like $180. So there still is money being appropriated into that. But look at the rest of these increases. They're essentially de minimis. It's all in that health, and that's with a zero wage increase. So you can see from there what drives the budget. Now, we have, in addition, in the process this year through the coordinating committee, affected a change in the format of the budget, and you know that's been talked about for several years. You will see in Article 8, which is the omnibus budget, there's a single line for $10,456,673. The remainder of the money in the coordinating plan, the coordinating committee's plan, chargeable municipal budget, is those funds contained in Articles 10, 11, 12, and 13. The $10.4 million figure goes back to Table 3 and page 5 of the budget and shows you the history of that. This slide helpfully puts in some percentages which we didn't have there. And when we make a full budget presentation, we'll go through this and discuss it in detail. We hope this is the budget presentation, by the way, we will be making. We don't know what's going to happen to revenue. We may have to rethink this. It just coincidentally comes out that the municipal budget increase proposed on the facts as we now know it is this magic figure of 2.5%. It's coincidental, but it does some degree speak to the times. Now the format, let me just say a word about that, has been an evolution toward better management as we try to maximize services in retreat. This process was begun in 1986 when the more than 70 legal lines in the budget were reduced to 11. And the FinCom message in the warrant that year said, and I quote in part, the town meeting is giving the town's administration much greater authority and accountability for the use of funds. We are confident this will result in greater administrative efficiency, thus saving money. In 1989, the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen disagreed about taking the next step. But last year, in 1990, the two committees agreed to have the number of remaining legal lines other than out-of-state travel, insurance, debt, and reserve fund for more flexible management. That allowed us to reduce, for the year we're currently in, the reserve fund by $150,000, so that the reserve fund would be $50,000 rather than $150,000. And you will see in the table, I didn't write down what table number it is, but it's in the warrant. You will see that because of that additional management flexibility this year, we have yet to request a reserve fund transfer, despite the fact that we've had some unexpected expenses, like the wreck of a police cruiser, like having to fund some consultants to carry on ongoing engineering negotiations and discussions with Maynard over sewer tie-ins, etc. In this budget cycle, the budget cycle we're talking about now, projecting forward into fiscal 92, when the construction of this budget was begun, we reviewed the management situation again, and the town manager, staff, and the selectmen determined that if we went to the full bottom line, we could squeeze out another $100,000. In other words, that the election was a bottom line at $100,000 less, or a separated lines of 9 or 11 lines, $100,000 more. We discussed this at the beginning of the process, coordinating committee and the finance committee, and it was agreed that we would go forward on the bottom line basis. On that basis, this budget was constructed. On that basis, the amount of the override was set by the Board of Selectmen for submission, the override question, for submission to the voters, and was voted. It really, the town manager keeps reminding me it's really more work for him to do it this way, but there's the same accountability. You will see the budget object broken out into 25 objects as I have it here on page 5 on your warrant, and as I say, when we make the full budget presentation, which may or may not be these numbers, we will discuss it in detail. As I've said, our motto continues to be to try to maximize services in retreat. When I was talking on format for the presentation tonight on budget status, as Lee's indicated, I said, let's try and cut out how great we are and just give a quick status report. And we all sort of agreed we'd have one brag slide. This is the Selectmen's brag slide. We are now audited every year by an outside accounting firm, and this is what they said here very recently. We have similar language in the reports of the various bonding agencies, outside agencies that review our fiscal and management apparat seem to be highly pleased with us, and unlike the state, we have a bond rating. Thank you.
If I'm right, we've passed over Articles 3, 4, 5, and 6 by consent. We've passed them by consent. And we had Article 7, which was on the consent calendar, but was held. So we will take up Article 7 now as if it were in its normal place. I'll read the motion. Mrs. Stuntz moved that the town appropriate $149,788 for the purpose of maintaining the Merriam School, and that the receipts from the rental of Merriam School be set aside as a separate fund under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E, to meet this appropriation. Do I hear a second? Been moved and seconded, Mrs. Stuntz, to your motion. Mrs. Harding-Barrett, you're going to speak to the motion? All right. Do you have slides to show?
It's up to whoever wanted to hold it, whether they want a presentation or just answer the question.
Why don't we ask the person who held it or persons to indicate what they're interested in, and that may help. Mr. Swenson.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Murray. The question is, as it has been in previous years, as to the source of the income for the Merriam enterprise, and the question revolves around what rates are being charged according to the category of user. My concern is that rates may be charged to for-profit users that are being subsidized essentially by the taxpayer.
You'll be showing some slides? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're in the school system?
I'm glad our budget didn't come up tonight. Are you ready?
Ready.
We'll put up a few slides here. I guess the first one basically shows the proposed budget for Merriam, $149,788, is up 4.2%. The rental income that will be generated next year is $211,964. So you can see that the rental up. How's that? The rental income will be $211,964, which will far exceed the operating budget. In answer to your question in terms of what the rents are, if you take a look at this slide, you can see back in, I will push it up here, in 81, 82, when Merriam became a mixed-use facility and we began to rent it out, at that point in time we had one rental rate. It was $3.50 per square foot. The rental rates for next year, we have three different rates. We have one rate, the first rate there, $10.75, which we call a non-social service educational rate, applies to one tenant, which is the caterer in the building. Then the next rate, $9.35, which we call a social service education rate, applies to all of the other tenants with the exception of the last rate. And basically those tenants are mostly daycare operations, daycare for children, We have a daycare program for frail elderly, for very elderly people. So the $9.35 is the rate for the majority of the tenants, and then the $7.45 rate, which we call a governmental school rate, applies to one tenant. The Acton and Acton-Boxborough schools participate in something called the CASE Collaborative for Special Education, and one of their programs is housed at Merriam, a program called the CASE Alternative High School, and that is the rent that is charged to that particular program. So most of the tenants are paying the $9.35 per square foot, and again, the rents will generate over $60,000 more than the proposed operating budget.
Mr. Swenson, do you have a question?
Yes, I guess it's still not clear to me which of these renters are for profit and which are not for profit, and which rate do they pay?
This is a listing of the Merriam tenants that are in the building, people that use the building. I'll go down that list. The first group, Acton Public Schools Conference Room, is a room that's made available to the community. It's used for meetings. It's just that, it's a conference room. No one, obviously there's no charge for that. We do have in rooms 9 and 10 at the Merriam building, the Acton Public Schools has their curriculum specialist. This is an old slide. It says an academically talented program. That program's been eliminated. But our curriculum specialist and computer lab is in room 9 and 10. The CASE Alternative High School, the program that I talked about, which is a public school program that pays the lower rate, the $7.45 per square foot, is in room 6, 7, 8, and half of room 5. Then the next group, Cooperative Elder Service, is a nonprofit organization. Again, that's a program that provides daycare for frail elderly. They're in rooms 11, 12, and 13. The Gymnast, which is in what used to be the cafeteria, I assume they're probably incorporated as a, I don't know for a fact, but as a profit-making organization. It's a gymnastics school. Then the Infant Toddler program, which is nonprofit, is in rooms 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you have Kitty Country Club, and I don't know exactly how they're incorporated, which is daycare, along with Serendipity, which is daycare, and clearly the last group, Seasoned Specialties, which is a caterer, and they're charged the higher rate. They're clearly a business.
Well, Mr. Swenson get his last question out. No, he's Mr. Grolick.
Is not the Gymnast a business?
Yes, it is a business.
Are they paying a higher rate?
No, because our rate is not based on profit and non-profit. It's based on those 3 criteria that I mentioned when we talked about rates. On this slide again, the 3 rates that we have, the 1075 applies to what we call non-social service education rate. The only tenant that meets that criteria is the catering firm. The next, the $9.35 rate applies to any of the groups that we consider social service or educational programs, which basically are most of them, and most of them are daycare of one type or another, either daycare for children or daycare for the frail elderly.
Mr. Moderator, can I follow?
Mr. Grolick.
Could you explain how you determine where the Gymnast fits in those 3? I understand it doesn't fit in the last one, but is it not a business? How is it educational, or how is it not, social service, which is, I assume, is where you've got it?
That's correct. That's where it is, Neil. I mean, it's always been there. It's come under that criteria. Again, we have not used the criteria of profit and non-profit.
All right. Any other question? You might just want to turn that off, Kara, if you would. Thank you. Is there any other comment anyone wishes to make under Article 7? Seeing no one standing, we'll vote on the motion as read. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. I believe we postponing 8, and we're moving on to Article 9, dealing with town meeting. I have a minimal, it's minimal problem to me, and I'd like to get a sense of the meeting. At the Acton Candidates Night some weeks ago, I was asked a question regarding this article as to whether I was in favor of it or not. I answered the question, and obviously I have a position on this article. And because moderators should be unbiased, I will ask the meeting whether they would like me to moderate this particular question or step aside and allow someone else to moderate it, which I would be glad to do. I would hope I could do it in an unbiased fashion, but I will leave that to you. Mr. Gromick?
Mr. Moderator, we've been working with you for a lot of years. I move that you... Do we need to move this?
No, I'll just ask for a sense of the meeting.
Then I think that we ought to stick with you.
Okay, thank you. All right, is anybody opposed? I want the names, if they are. We'll move to Article 9. Mr. Lafreniere moves that the town instruct the Board of Selectmen to petition the legislature for an act permitting the town to adopt a representative form of town meeting as set forth in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 43A. Do I hear a second? Moved and seconded. Mr. Lafreniere, to your motion. I think you have some slides, is that correct? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow residents of Acton. I'm Alfred Lafreniere. I reside at 144 Park Street. Firstly, I would like to make a reference and comment to Mr. McKenzie's remarks, because I too was concerned when I read the report in the Beacon, and like all of you, I've never considered him biased. So this evening he explained how that came about, and we've all agreed that certainly there's no question of his not considering handling this particular article. Many of you probably witnessed the mother of all briefings by General Norman Schwarzkopf last February. Were Senator Benson here tonight, he would undoubtedly say, "Al, you're no General Schwarzkopf." With a parting reference to the great general, who reportedly was asked recently whether he could classify himself as a hawk or a dove, "Neither," he said. "I'm an owl. I hope to watch, to learn, and be wise." As I read this particular reference, come to mind two young children who live next to me, with whom we have a great friendship. And they refer to me as Owl Frenier. Now, I don't think they call me that because I'm wise, but the owl is there anyway. It's not intended that this initiative be viewed as a threat from within or without. Despite the legalistic wording of the article, we are, in effect, considering whether to authorize a study. Approval would next be followed by an act of the Massachusetts legislature to allow the town to establish representative town meeting. Next, the details of the new system would have to be formulated and approved by open town meeting, and then through a town election, and finally, election of town members. Representative town meeting would replace the open town meeting with, say, 150 elected town members with 30 or 25 representatives be elected from each of the town's precincts. They would receive no compensation. Any voter would be eligible to be a candidate to be elected and to serve as a town meeting member. Nominations of candidates for town meeting members would be made by nomination papers signed by not less than 25 voters of the precinct in which the candidate resides and from which the candidate seeks election. Any resident of the town who is not an elected town meeting member may attend sessions of the town meeting but may not vote. However, subject to such rules as may be from time to time adopted, any resident may participate in proceedings. There would be a quorum, and I might just briefly describe the duties of town meeting members. It shall be the duty, I read this from a neighboring town's commission report. It shall be the duty of town meeting members to keep abreast of town business, review materials forwarded to members by the Board of Selectmen and the town manager. It is expected that town meeting members will attend selected meetings of multiple member bodies, attend hearings held by the Finance Committee, and actively prepare for each session of the town meeting. Excuse me. All sessions of the town meeting shall be presided over by the elected town moderator. There'd be the usual warrant articles, etc. And here, you see, these are the elected members, and here are the spectators, and presumably there would be more than that, but that will give you an idea. What started all this? The second night of town meeting, my first town meeting experience 10 years ago, there were very few there really, and I spoke to our moderator and learned that no quorum was required. As I attended subsequent years, I watched the various occurrences with which we're all familiar. And then on October 1987, the Beacon published a letter that I had written in which I observed some of the things which I think do not enhance a town meeting. And then on April 1989, excuse me, I wrote another letter about what I considered flaws in the system. In one of these letters, I offered a suggestion that we might have a ballot form in our hands as we discuss the articles, vote on them, and submit them for account subsequently. This would perhaps make it easier for people who become nervous, as I presumably am, obviously am, and one wouldn't have to even answer to his wife to explain why he stood for a certain article. It can be intimidating. It is not a secret process, so we have to stand and bear scrutiny from friends, neighbors, etc. As the year went on, a year or two ago, I was following the town profiles in the Boston Globe. And as you recall, on Saturdays they show the various towns throughout New England even. And what particularly interested me was the type of town government. And I noted that Lexington had representative town meeting. So I went to the Lexington Library, studied old town reports, and then attended one of their meetings of the representative town meeting in March of 1989. And there I saw, as you saw on the slide, a concentration of the elected members in assigned seats and precincts, the moderator, finance committee, and the selectmen. I might digress for a moment that when word of this particular article we're discussing or considering tonight was published in the press, there was a reference to a suggestion that the council form of government might be better for Acton. That involves about 18 or 19 people instead of town meeting, and incidentally, no selectmen, and I don't think that that's particularly appropriate. Barnstable, this past January, which has had an open town meeting for 20 years, opted for the council and moved from approximately 270 members to 19, but I wouldn't suggest that we consider that at the moment. And what I found in the Lexington Library was that in 1926, the state legislature passed legislation that would allow any town with 6,000 or more residents to elect for a representative town meeting. Lexington, when they had 4,500 voters, decided that they would incorporate this system. That happened to be 62 years ago. As time went on, last year I arranged to have myself invited to a board meeting of the Acton League of Women Voters. And I made a little presentation of the information that I had found. And the ladies were very kind and reported that they had looked at this 10 years ago and perhaps they should look at it again. Then this past December, a friend informed me of the deadline for the submission of warrant articles, which was December 21. With preliminary help from a friend and shortly after I returned from a trip, I obtained 24 signatures from various sections of the town, from people who were many long-time residents, but I also tried to get a geographical distribution. And then in late January, I sent a circular to some public libraries where I knew that the representative town meeting system was used. And in this circular, I asked the approximate date that they had established the system and the approximate registered voters at that time. And here you see Belmont took the initiative very quickly. Belmont took the initiative very quickly. With only 677 voters, they changed their system. Danvers, as you can see. So these people have been doing this for a long time. This evening, I was very kindly handed a standard form of representative town meeting government with all the various procedures and steps and responsibilities of the various positions. So it apparently would not be too hard to formulate rules and regulations. I was also given a list of all of the towns in Massachusetts that presently use a representative form of town government, and they're in the range of just under 50. But what the list does show is the present number of residents, which is not the information that we need. We should have, when did they opt for the system? The information I'm using tonight is taken from a commission report of a nearby town a few years ago, which is select the system. For those who may have their view blocked, educated body members are required to obtain all available information on every issue to be well informed. I watched my wife trying to keep track of what was going on by flicking through the pages of the Warren article, and it really is difficult for the inexperienced person. Citizen interest. Many citizens who become disinterested will be energized to visit neighbors, collect signatures for the position of town meeting. This is not a very good first night. Perhaps the date is inauspicious. Accountability. Unlike random votes at open town meeting, voting records of representative town meeting members can be determined and those persons held accountable for their votes. Stability. A stable membership avoids sudden, unforeseen influences on specific issues, and consistent attendance is required. And this problem is not peculiar to Acton, but it'll be found throughout New England, including immediately neighboring towns. There is some discussion of the problem publicly, and the Sunday Globe on March 3rd had an article headed "Town Meeting, Relic of the Past," and going on to explain, across New England, town officials and government specialists are wondering if town meetings, long considered the shining light of grassroots democracy, work anymore. The complexity of modern local government is beyond the ken of the vast majority of citizens, who pay no attention to local issues throughout the year, but then must decide in a single day's march through a town meeting warrant how the town will conduct its business for the next year. 20th century political observers generally criticize the New England town meeting and conclude it has outlived its usefulness, says Joseph H. Zimmerman, wrote that in 1967 in the Massachusetts town meeting, a tenacious institution. Here are some observations that a neighboring town presented in its commission report, approved 6-3 by a panel of 9. We as American citizens conduct our national legislative business through elected representative government. We as citizens of Massachusetts conduct our state legislative business through elected representative government. We use representatives at the national and state level because of the large number of people involved, and the realization that any open form of government would be too unwieldy. The concept of representative government in the United States is as old as our country and therefore acceptable to us as a method for conducting our legislative business. The neighboring town, with many thousands of eligible voters, is too large, I'm still quoting, to meet in open session for the same reasons that apply to the national and state legislative bodies. If every eligible voter attended town meeting, it would be too large and unwieldy to be productive. The representative system offers a more orderly method of transacting the business of local communities. The Commission carefully studied, discussed, and debated the present form of open town meeting, recognizing the open town meeting as the purest form of democracy and the desire of some to see it untouched. The Commission looked carefully at the voters of the town and their participation in this process. During the past 15 years in this particular town, the average attendance at the opening session has been approximately 400 people. In view of the relatively small participation, a substantial majority of the commissioners determined that open town meeting was not a priority to a majority of voters. I'm going to ask your indulgence and go back for an important advantage that I overlooked. Townwide, each equally balanced precinct is represented by an equal number of representatives, and no single area can dominate on any issue. This optimistically represents a first night of open town meeting. This is second night. And third, with all due respect to everyone. Then dog leash night, first night again. And this is what you'd have if you had a representative town government. Now, there might be some disadvantages to this in that there would no longer be a consent calendar. The budget would be discussed and voted on line by line, et cetera, et cetera. It would take longer, but I think it's necessary to spend the time required. And this is no reflection on the wonderful people who are trying to cope with a very adverse situation and spending countless hours year in and year out running the town. But this is a different format. My suit is coming apart. Here is open town meeting in Acton as of January 3rd. My information is that we had 10,859 registered voters. The typical first night attendance is more than generous, and this is the representation you have at best. This is representative town meeting every night, 100%, barring a few absences or what have you through illness. So, open town meeting, representative town meeting. We are employing a political system conceived in the 17th century as we live in the last decade of the 20th century. Acton, with an annual budget in excess of $30 million, may well be likened to a good-sized company in the private sector, with our elected officials constituting the chief executive officer and operating officers of such a company, and we, the electorate, make up the board of directors. One has to wonder, in this era of bottom-line business attitudes, who would invest in a company where the company's annual meetings were attended by an uncertain and indeterminate number of board members? Thank you for listening.
I recognize Mr. Hunter from the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator, the Board of Selectmen oppose this motion for a great variety of reasons. First off, the process is wrong. If we were going to move toward a representative town meeting, I submit that there should be a process, something akin to the Charter Commission, which obviously has occurred in other towns based on the proponents' readings. I don't see anything in this motion about a study. It says we're supposed to petition the legislature. This is get the authority and then, you're halfway home and you're going to do it. So much about the process. The analogy to a corporation, I think, is misleading. If you want to draw an analogy to a corporation, we're the stockholders of the corporation. And I'm not going to be involved in a corporation, or as a stockholder, I don't have some vote. The assumption seems to be that in a representative town meeting, by definition, all the members come. That is not the case. You have quorum problems in that sort of meeting. And you most definitely have length problems. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm an elected official, and when I want to get reelected, it's important that I set out my positions. So you're an elected town meeting member. By definition, you almost have to speak on every article. If there are 150 meeting members and a reasonable percentage of them attend, say 100, that can get kind of long. And indeed, in Lexington, which has been mentioned as an example, last year, there were 55 articles. There was a debate, limitation of 5 minutes per person. You know what the reaction's been here when I've recommended 10 minutes a person. And it took them 11 sessions and 8 weeks to get through 55 articles. I submit that's not a very efficient process. I think it's not misapprehension that there were only 14 spectators, that is, those people that can come but can't vote, on the slide that was shown. There are some costs involved in this, and I respectfully differ with the Finance Committee's position on that. There are election costs. You're going to be electing 50 people a year, let's say, for a 150 people meeting. That's going to be a few $100s in any event in ballots and petitions and so forth. And the typical representative town meeting, in fact, there has to be some referendum process next to it by statute. Typical town meeting, representative town meeting process has a referendum potential after certain votes. And if there is a referendum vote of the town after a representative town meeting vote, we're talking about something in the order of $5,000 to $7,000 a shot. So there are costs potentially involved in this. However, I think, just to give you, while I'm on statistics, there are 311 Massachusetts towns, 258 have open town meetings, 46 have representative town meetings, and 7 have a council manager form of government. I think, and I believe the board agrees with me, that the representative town meeting is the worst of both worlds. It excludes you. The debate will be about how many of you people that are here tonight would not be able to come here and debate and vote on the issues. There is a tendency for representative town meetings for a perhaps disproportionate number of the representatives to end up being town employees or other people that have particular interests. And unlike those things that are brooded around about the open meeting, about somebody stacking the meeting, it's really very hard to stack a meeting, because if there's some group that's very interested in something, it tends to go out and get its people, and it tends to stir up those people that aren't interested in it to get their people and come, and so everybody can come. But in a representative town meeting, if you already have the special interest, if you want to think of that, if it's a possibility, if there is already a stacked deck, you can't unstack it in any particular meeting. Now, I think we are talking here about the whole character of Acton government. This town is run by an incredible number of people who devote an inordinate amount of time. And how do people get involved in the town? They move in, and they are interested, and the process is the most porous and permeable process I've ever seen in any town and moving around the country. If you want to be involved in government in Acton, by golly, you're involved, and you can start right here by showing up at the meeting, putting in your 2 cents if you want to, but at least voting. There is no closed clique in Acton. Now, if we go to a representative town meeting with all good intentions of it being, quote, more efficient, and I'll get back to that again in a moment, we are going to close that process. And we are going to have a very different town, I submit. I'm not sure what it will be, but it will be very different than this process. And I think it's going to be a much more difficult town to manage. If there are 150 people there, let's assume they all do come. Let's assume they all do follow that direction to follow all the things that go on in town. Can you imagine Don Johnson functioning in town hall with 150 town meeting members coming in to see him one at a time, and they are going to want to see the manager, not the assistant manager or Roy Weatherby or some other delegee down the line. They are going to be the voters, and they are going to want the attention, and they are going to deserve the attention. And I think just in the question of staff time in town hall, we would be swamped. This is Acton. This is not other towns. Representative town meeting may work very well in other towns. But I would urge this meeting not to say, oh, well, this is only to go petition the state. By the way, the state's got a lot of other things to do, which I wish they'd get at, and not bother about this sort of thing. But I would submit that we should not start this process by going to the state and getting authority, and then somebody saying, oh, well, it's been studied in other towns, why don't we just simply vote it? If you all feel a groundswell that you want to think about a representative town meeting, I suggest we construct a process, something like the Charter Commission, there'd be hearings held, there'd be an opportunity for a broad cross-section of Acton, and a thorough study of where we want our town government to go and what the impacts are. I'm sure there are things that would evolve out of a representative town meeting that none of us sitting here tonight have even thought of. And I would urge on behalf of the Board of Selectmen that you vote this proposal down. Thank you.
Mr. Aguilar.
The Finance Committee makes no recommendation with respect to this article.
Okay, Mr. Crowley. I'll take the people standing around in this fashion.
Mr. Moderator, there is scarcely any kind of issue that could get me more up in arms than this particular one. I apologize to this meeting. I've been absent for 2 years and for various reasons, but I'm here tonight, and I'll probably be here for the rest of my time in this town, hopefully long. But I agree totally with Doré have just said. I'm in the business of dealing with towns. I petition towns in various forms and various town governments and bureaucrats for various forms of permits for my clients. And I would much rather go to a town meeting where I know who the players are in advance, what their biases are, what their positions are, and stack my presentation that way. Believe me, it's much easier. We've heard that other towns have quorum problems with town meetings. They certainly do, and it's been in the news. It is naive to assume that town meeting members, but automatically, because they are supposed to, will either attend the number of meetings they have to, or will be knowledgeable about the issues, any more than anybody else is knowledgeable about the issues. We tend to come, a lot of us, and find out a lot about some of these articles right here on this floor. Democracy is a participatory sport. It's not a sport where you sit on the sidelines and watch. We do not have control, direct or even indirect, if you will, of our state and federal governments because of the size involved, and I agree with that. But by God, we have absolute direct control of what happens in our town if we choose to do it. Don't give it away. If you don't want to be represented, don't come to town meeting. It's very simple. This is a 100% representation system. Everybody who cares is here. There are cases, and we have debated in this town meeting and outside the town meeting over the years, the possibilities of providing daycare for those people who can't get here for one reason or another. There are lots of solutions to solving the problems of the I think, relatively small number of people who want to be here but cannot be here for one reason or another. We can solve those problems if we choose to, but we don't have to solve them by disenfranchising ourselves, which is exactly what this does. It is naive to assume that in a normal election, which I believe we typically get 25 or 30% coming out to vote, that we have any better representation than we do with a few hundred people who seriously care about what happens in this town and comes out and makes their voice heard. To those people who don't care to come, great. They make my vote count much more. And I have a few things to say about things, and I want to be heard, and I don't want anybody telling me I can't come. I've paid the price of admission every time I pay my taxes. I want to come and watch the show and be part of it. Vote this article down.
Mr. Cadlick.
Mr. Moderator, I have a sense that if you're going to present an article like this is the wrong audience to present it to. Therefore, I won't dwell on it. But all through Mr. Defrenier's presentations, I was trying to listen to see what's wrong. What are the reasons that we need to change something? And I really didn't hear that. I don't think anything's broken, and I think we all know that. His referral to, reference rather, to our state and federal representation being by election, with all due respect to past and present representatives that may be here, did not impress me as a very good argument. As to the efficiency of either our state legislature or Congress, we won't dwell on that. But I think the most important thing, at the risk of violating, Mr. Moderator, your rule of repeating, is one of the things Mr. Hunter said, which is access and participation. Almost anyone involved in town affairs started by going to town meeting. And yes, you could come to town meeting as a visitor if we had a representative town meeting, but very few people would. All you have to do is to go to any meeting from the Board of Selectmen on down, and you'll find very few people there as visitors. That would happen. It would interpose another layer of elected officials, hard to find elected officials, between us and what happens in town, and it would shut off the flow of new people who wish to participate and get involved. And if for no other reason, that's why I would vote against this, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Mr. Putnam.
John Putnam, Mr. Moderator of Pope Road. When I was operating at your exalted level a number of years ago, this matter came up. I discussed it with the League of Women Voters. We didn't do a complete study, nowhere near as detailed as we've heard tonight, but we got the pretty clear impression that A, we didn't have one terrible bad problem, and B, we weren't so darn sure that the representative town meeting was working very well elsewhere anyhow. Now, most of the things, in fact, all of the things that I could say against this motion, this article, have already been said by Dory Hunter and the other two, so I'll just simply sign off by saying that since you seem to be able to stand on your feet and keep your wits and run a meeting pretty well, and other things are going well, and I find no evidence of injustices occurring because of the open town meeting, I'm just solidly against it. Thank you.
Lady at the back.
Mr. Moderator, Jan Edry, Neshoba Road. Pretty much everybody is saying the same thing I'm about to say, with the exception that everybody's talking about other towns. I don't live in other towns. I really don't care what they do in other towns. That's their system. If they like it, that's fine. This is the only system where I can go to school committee meetings, but I can't vote. I can go to a finance committee should I choose to, but I can't vote. I can go to selectmen's meetings, but I can't vote in whatever committees there are available. This is the only place where these committees are held accountable to the voters of the town. And I don't want that right taken away from me, and I'd much rather have this group who is informed representing me than somebody who's sitting in a back room somewhere. I just strongly recommend we turn this down. Thank you.
Gentleman at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First, let me preface my remarks by saying that I think...
I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself, please?
Excuse me. This is Raj Chidley from Woodchester Drive in Acton. Let me preface my remarks by saying that town meeting and town citizens in general owe a debt of gratitude to the gentleman who presented this article for doing his homework and for taking such care as to, taking such care as to take a principle that he believed in and take something that he cared about and follow it through and do his homework and submit a petition about something he cared about, even though he knew it might not be very popular, and even though prominent citizens of the town might not have been in support of it, he still continued through, and he, I think, gave an excellent presentation, and I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude, even though we may not support the article. Second of all, the gentleman spoke to information and the representatives being educated about what goes on in town meeting. And I think the counterpoint to that statement is the warrant itself. Beside every article, for those who care, for those who want to find out, there's a selectman that can answer questions. The town manager, I know because I interned with him last year, and I was on the other side of the stage listening to what he did. And I know that he is more than happy to answer questions, and more than happy to inform voters and to resolve any questions they might have. And I think that a representative town meeting wouldn't really improve the education of the voters. It would just simply be the special interest in those people who wanted, perhaps, to represent a special interest would end up representing those interests, and those of us who just wanted to come to town meeting to listen, to ask questions, to have our vote heard, so to speak, would lose that right. And I think town meeting pretty much rewards those who come and those who care to come. And this is my first town meeting as a voter, and I don't want it to be my last. Thank you.
Mrs. Perkins.
I'm Bea Perkins of Spring Hill Road, and I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Acton Stowe. Since 1971, when we first studied the open versus the representative town meeting, we have been in favor of the former for many reasons. We again affirmed our support for open town meeting in 1985 and each year since then. We oppose this article which asks the selectmen to petition the legislature for an act to permit us to adopt the representative form. This article, if approved, would circumvent the normal and usual process of making changes in our town charter via a charter commission. The League also believes that a thorough study of the pros and cons of open town meeting representatives and its alternatives should be a prerequisite to making a change in the charter. This article does not call for a study. We as citizens need to discuss the ramification, including the extra costs of representative town meeting, its responsibilities and obligations. The League urges your no vote on this article. Thank you.
Before we just continue around, because we've had a number of people speaking opposed to the article, is there anybody who wishes to speak in favor of it? Okay, fine. I'll recognize, well, why don't we move to you then, Mr. Bouvier, now? And just so that we don't have all one side, I'm afraid of someone moving the previous question and cutting off debate.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Ted Bouvier from Seneca Road. Excuse me. First, I think I can't answer these questions, but I think they should be asked. The question seems to come up whether this involves a study. I think perhaps the town council could answer whether in this process there will be some studying as a prelude to what we finally put before the voters. The second one is there's been some suggestion perhaps that you can't debate. I think Mr. Hunter used the word debate. Is it true or is it not true that a representative form allows free debate among voters and non-voters? There's just two questions maybe the town council could answer. I just have one comment on Mr. Hunter's comment on Mr. Lafreniere's analogy of a corporate farm. I believe in the corporate farm, the stockholders elect the directors elect the officers who in turn manage the company. The stockholders vote on some very limited financial matters, just as I assume we would still vote on the 2.5 overrides as a body politic down at the polls. But if this is indeed a study, it seems to me there's very little downside risk to approve it. But certainly the consequences of the study, if it were to come up with a proposal, are serious, and I can understand these concerns. If you just give me 2 minutes to review, I'll do it in 2 minutes, the history. Well, I heard these concerns before. The first one, I think, was in the late 40s, early 50s, when Acton proposed its first serious zoning article. And then we heard words like deprivation of use of property without due process of law, loss of individual rights. But somehow we passed the zoning article, and I think today we would all shudder if we did not have zoning. The next thing that came along, I believe, whether it was the planning board itself, but I know it was the turning over of subdivision control from the selectmen to the planning board. At that time, we heard words, another bureaucracy to go through. It's going to encumber town government. But I think, again, there isn't a person on the Board of Selectmen who wouldn't shudder at having to administer now the approval or disapproval of residential subdivisions. And then the big, really change in Acton's course was the town manager. Not only did that approve the choosing of a town manager, but it did some other things as well. We got 4 votes on that one, 4 ballot votes. Normally you only got 3, but through the good efforts of the Honorable John Eaton of Concord, he got us 4 votes. The first 3, we defeated it. And on the 4th, we put it through. And thanks to some fine selectmen and a great succession of town managers, that process seems to work extremely well. And Ms. McKenzie, it's hard for you to believe, but even at that time, the moderator, that charter provided for the moderator appointing the Finance Committee. And there were words like conflict of interest and he should be completely divorced from this whole process. But through your fine selections, we've had great finance committees all that time. So I don't think so those are 3 cases where these kinds of concerns were raised, but we went ahead and voted them anyway, and we seem to have gone along okay. The real problem, it seems, and somebody asked what the problem was, you're looking at them. I'm one of them. And I suspect that there are others in this hall, and as Mr. Cadlick says, there are a lot of them out there that happily are watching the Celtics, I guess. But these issues, I'm guilty, but I think I have an excuse for being. These issues are too big, too complicated, involve too many dollars for us as an individual voter to decide on one night's hearing. Now, you might say, well, we ought to take this stuff home. Mr. Hunter said if we all went down to the selectmen or to Roy Weatherby and asked him questions, which we would have to do to be informed voters, if you think how many Lafreniere wants, if we all went down, which is probably 10 times as many, it would be pandemonium. So in order to have an informed electorate, we've got to have some kind of extra effort. However, your vote is not that complicated if the Finance Committee agrees and the Selectmen agree and the proposer of the motion agree. But when people, literally of whom I stand in awe, like Mr. Cadlick, presents one side of the proposal and the articulate Mr. Hunter presents another side, what am I to do? I haven't really done my homework. I say I should have done my homework, but I haven't done it. And the fact is, we're not doing it. So it seems to me this at least deserves a study, a little downside risk, to see if we can perhaps take a better course as we have in this town since 1950. Thank you, sir.
I would ask the two questions that Mr. Bubia asked to be answered by Mike Callahan, the town council. As long as you don't make me repeat what the two questions were.
That makes me remember what they were. Let me address the second question first. That is whether or not people who attend can debate, even if they're not elected representatives. Most representative town meetings permit citizens to debate, but that is one of the many decisions that have to be made about how you structure a representative town meeting form. There is in the general laws a standard form, so-called, but most towns have adopted specialized charters. They've developed the whole paraphernalia, how many representatives there shall be, how many precincts, what they do, what their responsibilities are, and so forth. And that really responds to the first question. I think as Mr. Hunter said, this article goes directly to go. We're asking for a special act when there is no sense of what is in the contents of the special act. And that is the need for a study seems to me to be clear here.
I'll just continue the rotation as it was going. Mr. Harrigan.
Mr. Moderator, I'm a relative newcomer here. I'm Art Harrigan from Robinwood Road. It's my observation, though, in looking at the area of New England and in this community in general, that it's the culture of the people in general to be very satisfied with open town meeting. And I think that is the contribution statement that I wanted to make, in addition to the fact that 8%, if we're a little bit liberal in that number, coming to the town meetings, even though it's the first town meeting, is a fairly substantial percentage of the town voters. And to me it says that people in general are very interested in what is going on and want to have a voice, even though they may not always exercise it. So I think on the other side, I would say that as imperfect as the system is, the system does work federally and state-wise in terms of a representative government, but it is imperfect. So it's an alternative. It's worth considering, but I think on balance for this group here in this city here, this town, that we should be against the motion.
Mr. Swenson.
Yes, it's hard to say anything new on this item. I think this is an attempt to fix something that isn't broken, or maybe break something that's working perfectly all right. I've been at town meeting for over 20 years, 22, 23 years. I've sat through to the bitter end, and when it goes into 5 meetings and there's only a handful of people here, it does get a little bit slow. But it's an opportunity to come down and to represent yourself. I think I can represent myself better than anybody else, because I'm the one that knows how I think, and I'm the one that knows what I want, not somebody out there. And I'm perfectly satisfied with the open town meeting.
Mrs. Piper, you wanted to speak in favor of the article, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
I'll let you speak next then.
I'm Regina Poppert on Muscat Drive, and I would just like to say we have approximately 10,000 registered voters in the town of Acton. This evening, we have only had 286 in attendance, and I think that number speaks for itself. I think we have really outlived the usefulness of open town meeting. And I think it is time to take a long, hard look at the future as far as how we run our town government. And I am definitely in favor of this article. Thank you.
Gentleman at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Joe Caratanudo from Mohegan Road. I'd like to say that my wife and I just purchased our first home here in Acton, and I see people wanting to leave here, so I'll try to make this quick. Recently, I've been discussing with friends of mine who had also purchased homes, one couple in the Springfield area, and they were discussing how they were running for a town meeting. And I was on a party call at this time with a few other people, and we all laughed and said, "Running for town meeting, ha ha ha." And I said, yes, I'm going to go to my first town meeting coming up, and here I am. And lo and behold now, what I had been laughing about on the phone has come up as an article here for discussion. And as a matter of fact, I had thought about this issue. Town meeting, to me, is the open door into local politics and then future politics, as was discussed earlier. And I'd just like to offer myself as an example that this is my first town meeting, and I also do not want it to be my last. I have many other things that I get involved in. I'm a fairly active person. I sing in a choir. I play in a band in Lexington. This eats up most of my evenings, and I would feel obligated to run for town meeting if that came to be an issue. And in doing so, I would be curbing my other activities, which I would hate to do when I can just come to town meeting as it is now, when I know that there's something that I'm concerned with being debated. I have enough bombardment of information in this information age without having to keep up with every single article that comes up at town meeting. And frankly, I haven't voted at everything on every issue that's come up yet because I haven't known. But when I do feel that I know, I do vote. So I'd like to say that I'm in favor against this resolution. Thanks.
Mr. Cady.
Move the question.
All in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Debate is cut off. We will now vote on the motion as read. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. Motion has lost. Well, let's see. We've postponed 10. We postponed 11, we postponed 12, we postponed 13, 14, 15, and I think we're on to 16. Article 16, dealing with the hazardous waste material control bylaw. I believe this bylaw takes just a majority vote, does not take 2/3. Mr. Emmons moves that the town vote to amend the town bylaws as set forth in the warrant. Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Emmons, do you have some slides to show? I do. You do. Mr. Emmons, before you begin, would you like to introduce this group with you?
Yes. I'm looking for the rest of the group. Okay. Present in various places in the auditorium are members of the Board of Health. I'm George Emmons, it's chairman this year. We have Joe Glannon here with me. And seated are Marilyn Hotch, Gerhard Heinrich, and Jonathan Bosworth. Sorry, Jonathan, but I'm nervous enough, and then my name circuits go dead at that point. Before we go to the substance of this bylaw, and I tell you about it, I need to make an amendment to it because it was printed incorrectly, as near as I can tell, looking at the draft that we had at the last board meeting. If you'll refer to page 26, at the very top, it's actually part of paragraph 2.1.3. You will see that I'm going to read just the top of that page. It reads, storage of the flammable and or combustible material would not create a fire and or hazard or explosion hazard. The motion would be to delete not, because the intent of this section is that an underground tank would only be replaced with another underground tank if there were the potential.
Mr. Emmons, you're amending it to delete the word not.
That's correct.
In the last, next to last line of paragraph 2.1.3.
That's right. I should wait for a second.
Let's take that as an amendment. I'll take the amendment without discussion, if we can, and then you can discuss the entire motion as amended. Do I hear a second to the amendment? Any need to discuss the amendment? No. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, say no. The amendment's carried. Motion has been amended.
Yeah. Okay. Tonight I'm going to discuss the portions of this bylaw, not the whole thing. First, I'll start off with an overview of what's here, what has happened, why we're here. Then I'll give some examples of the changes, and I stress only examples of the changes. If we went through all of them, we'd be here all night, part of tomorrow. In April of 1985, the present hazardous materials storage bylaw was adopted by the town meeting. It is basically a storage bylaw. It regulates the storage of hazardous materials. Between 86 and the present, the Board of Health has implemented, and I am assuming the fire chief has also implemented this bylaw. We've gained experience with it and have found ways that we would like to see it changed. In addition, as shown below that, in April of '89, the town adopted the groundwater protection districts as part of the zoning bylaws. And the consequence of that is that there have been some changes made to accommodate and reflect that protection. So in the fall of '89, through the present, through February, we began revising the bylaw. In February of '91, this year, we had a public meeting to discuss what has now become the Hazardous Materials Control Bylaw, because the attempt is to control hazardous materials in all forms, not just their storage. Okay. What I think this bylaw, what these revisions do, are they make the bylaw more inclusive than the original. They incorporate the aquifer protection districts that I've mentioned. They delineate permitting authority a little differently and a little more clearly, I hope. And they do clarify a number of sections, in particular those pertaining to regulations on tanks, storage in tanks. Now some examples of the changes that we have proposed. An overview of those changes. We've added some new definitions. There are some new prohibitions. We've revised the permitting process, as I've said, and have clarified the tank storage requirements. And I'll give examples again from each of these. The revised bylaw contains definitions which make it more than just a storage bylaw. It contains a definition of a hazardous material user. That's somebody who brings into town a hazardous material, uses it here in a manufacturing process, and then disposes properly of its waste. A hazardous materials generator, on the other hand, is someone who brings in previously non-hazardous materials, combines them in a way so that they become hazardous in a manufacturing process, and then disposes of the waste properly. And the old bylaw regulated storage only. So we've attempted to be more inclusive by hitting these by making these definitions and then regulating these people, entities, whatever. In the process, we also have clarified the definitions of discharge, of the abnormal loss of material. We've expanded the definitions of hazardous materials in the ways that are shown. That now includes certain genetic materials, which may be hazardous. It includes federally regulated materials, and there are long lists of them. And those include the final bullet here, which are certain biological materials, which are federally regulated materials. Now let me stop here for a second, Doug. I have not mentioned, and should have, that the numbers in parentheses are the relevant paragraphs within the bylaw, so that if I strike a chord with you that you want to find out where it is, then you should look in that particular paragraph. We made additional prohibitions. We have now prohibited underground storage, new installation of new storage tanks for the storage of hazardous materials in environmentally sensitive areas. Those areas are in Aquifer Protection Districts 1 and 2, within 100 feet of the floodplain, and within 500 feet of wetlands, open water bodies, and so forth. In addition, as we have implemented this bylaw, we have found that we have repeatedly imposed the condition that in areas where hazardous materials are used, stored, that we do not want to have floor drains that are open to septic systems or to the external environment. And so we've put that particular prohibition in this revision. And finally, we do not want a hazardous material that's been cleaned up to be disposed of by flushing it into the septic system, hence into the environment, or taken to the transfer station where it would be potentially handled by the people there, burned with unknown consequences, gases being generated at Neswick. And the state would require that the remnants from a cleanup be stored and removed by a hazardous material handler anyway. So that's been added. Exemptions to these prohibitions are as shown. One is a holdover from the original bylaw. I put it up here to assuage any fears. We're not prohibiting discharge of ordinary septic system waste, and we're not prohibiting the appropriate use of lawn, garden, and household products. The key word here is appropriate. On most of these, there are labels which indicate the proper usage, which should be followed. I've seen some of the material storage data sheets on these products. They are in large volume, quite potentially dangerous. So, and then some of them are, in addition, regulated by the federal government. Discharges are now required to be reported to the Board of Health. Prior to this time, they were reported only to the fire chief. And that meant that a flammable material was reported to the fire chief, and it might also have been potentially hazardous, and we did not know about it. So we've asked that, and we have required that it be reported to us. In addition, we now would require a remedial procedure plan, which indicates how the cleanup, if it must be ongoing, will be undertaken. And that would require a timetable and procedures and a number of things that are specified. These would be prepared both for the state, which would require it anyway, but for we would get a chance to see it and have input to what we thought would be appropriate measures to use in the town of Acton to clean up any loss. This is a rather detailed slide. I hope I can get through it fairly quickly. Permits are now required for the use and generation. You remember that I gave you the definitions earlier of hazardous materials, and there are limits now set that define who should apply for and needs to apply for a permit. Those include small and large scale generators, and these are defined in I think it's the federal regulations. People who use extremely hazardous materials, and these are on a federal list. People who store 50 pounds dry weight of material or 50 gallons for retail sale. And you're all about to have heart attacks. This should read new home heating oil tanks. That is new and or replacement home heating oil tanks. Again, this bullet requires permits, and I'll cover this again, for new and replacement home heating oil tanks. Permits are not required for biodegradable cleaners. Biodegradable is defined in the bylaw, and for existing home heating oil tanks. There is one additional criterion we've added for a permit. That is that you must have and generate a contingency plan. If you do have an accidental release of hazardous materials to the environment, then you have to have on hand a plan. I noted in, I think it was the Boston Globe, that they had more than a plan, they'd actually had a run-through of a response in one of the towns surrounding us, near us, and we haven't gone that far. I think that in some of the cases I've seen it would be really a very good idea, but we haven't gone that far. So. This is partly indicative of the way we have tried to handle tanks. Tanks are a complicated, to me anyway, complicated issue, and we've tried to, in handling underground storage, do it in two ways. Those tanks which are used to store flammable and hazardous materials would require permits from and are handled by both the fire department and the Board of Health. Prior to this time, they were only handled by the fire department, and what that meant was if somebody were storing 10,000 gallons of methyl ethyl ketone or toluene, both of which are hazardous, that the fire department would have sole authority of those. Those are very toxic chemicals, and they are flammable, but the Board of Health would not have had any say-so under the present bylaw. We now are suggesting that we be involved in hazardous flammable materials. For all other hazardous materials, the Board of Health would be involved, and not necessarily, and then not the fire chief. If they're not flammable, then it would be just the Board of Health. Discharge along the same lines would be reported both to the fire chief and to the Board of Health. And shown below, or in the next section, are that discharges or losses would be reported depending upon the type of loss. If it's a flammable material, the response procedure, rather, would be according to the state's fire code. If it's a hazardous waste, then it's according to the state's hazardous waste control regulations. If it is a hazardous material or a hazardous substance that is not regulated by the state, then we would suggest and hope that you will accept that it should be handled as if it were a hazardous waste, if it's a hazardous material. Okay, underground tank removal. Flammable materials, the tank, if it has to be removed, will be removed according to the state's fire code, just as in the way I've just outlined. Other hazardous materials or waste would be removed according to the hazardous waste regulations of the state. You'll see next something which is the way that we suggest that residential tanks which store home heating oil, a hazardous flammable material, be handled. We suggest that they be removed at an age of 20 years unless structurally sound. By structurally sound, I mean that the tank not fail a tightness test, that it pass a tightness test, and that the test be administered at 20 years and annually thereafter. And the bylaw does require that a leaking tank, home heating oil tank, be removed. Is that it? Okay, that ends my presentation, and that is just a brief overview, and we're open for questions and or comments.
Mr. Lake, the Board of Selectmen recommend your approval of this article. It brings the local bylaw into compliance with all state and federal requirements. It is sensitive to the aquifers in town. I would remind you that our water does not come out of a pipe. Our water, drinking water, comes out of the same ground that we discharge material into, and it behooves us to use great care what we put into the ground and how we do it. We urge your support.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee supports this article.
Other comment? I'll recognize the gentleman at the front microphone.
My name is Michael Case. I live on High Street. I have a couple of questions that I want you to clear up. Why aren't there any minimums on the size of storage of hazardous waste? For example, gasoline for lawnmowers. What's the minimum size tank?
That, I can find it quickly. There is a 25-gallon limit in, let's see, finding it's always a problem in this. 3.1.2. That's page 28 of the 27 of the bylaw. Yes, it is. And item number 2 says any storage or use within a 24-hour period exceeding 25 gallons liquid or 25 pounds dry weight of any hazardous material or waste except for retail sales.
That's for use.
Storage or use.
Okay. You said a stationary tank. Is that a 50-gallon drum, or is that something that's built in?
Let's see.
50-gallon drum, you know, quite often those are not stationary.
That's right.
So that's excluded from the bylaw.
Let's see. I think it is included. Let me check the definition of tank. It's a stationary device.
Stationary, so
Yeah,
it's not included in the bylaw. Somebody with a 50-gallon drum of a toxic material.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Somebody has a 50-gallon drum of toxic material that is excluded from the bylaw. It's not a stationary tank, for example. I think you know we got to make some of these things clear.
Right, and the way it has worked anyway has been that a 55-gallon drum is indeed covered. It has been covered in the past. Now,
but it's not now.
So,
I think we have to make some of these things clear before we vote on it.
Okay. Well, it's complicated enough. We're working on it. Apparently, what we've come to the conclusion is that gasoline and diesel fuel are exempted if they're stored on a marijuana vehicle.
Yeah.
And in a, it will be, let's see, stored in excess of 25 gallons in a tank. And a tank is a stationary stationary device.
Does it include it or exclude it?
I would say a 55-gallon drum, though it can be hefted about by a forklift, is stationary for all intents and purposes.
And a container is any portable device, I'm noting over here, that hazardous materials can be stored in. So if a container is a portable device, and I presume man-portable and not necessarily three-man portable, then all other things would become in essence, a tank. I hope that has at least made it a little clearer.
Any other comment?
Mr. Moderator?
Oh, Dr. Donald, I'm sorry.
Mary Donald from Taylor Road. Do we really need this bylaw? Are we not bound by the state, or is it because we need more stringent regulations than the state?
It's because we need more stringent regulations in the state. For example, we have taken a more stringent approach to underground storage tanks in zones 1 and 2. Zone 1 is if I go well wrong on this, Zone 1 is the area that's within a very close distance to the well. I can't remember the exact technical definition at the moment, but it's essentially, is it 100-day travel time? Zone 1? 1 year travel time to the well. That means that water and or materials that are in the ground within Zone 1 come out in your faucet, conceivably within 1 year. Zone 2 is the 180-day recharge area of the well. That means it has a long, drawn-out definition, but that means that potentially it could, at a later date, since it is further out than the Zone 1, could at a later date also come out of the well. So we are being more stringent, I think, than the state in that regard. We're being more stringent in the control of generators and users, for example, of hazardous material. We've also tried to tailor this to applications the way we have applied it, the present bylaw within the town of Acton, and we take a fairly stringent approach to storage and use. For example, I may be wrong, but I don't know that the state prohibits drains. Do they, Doug? Does the state prohibit drains in areas? They do? Okay, I stand corrected. In that case, we in the state are in accord. But we have, I think we are more stringent in a number of cases. Yeah.
Gentleman at the front microphone.
Charles Olmsted, Kinsley Road. For the underground tanks that fail a test after 20 years, presumably there may have been some leakage. What happens to the contaminated area?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, because it gives me a chance to scare people. If you have lost heating oil to the ground from an underground tank that is leaked, then you get visited by the state, and they will require you to remove the contaminated soils. Contaminated soils are removed and hauled to a secured storage facility. You can choose your own number, but in purposes of planning for this meeting, I thought, well, suppose I have an area around a tank that is leaked. It is 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet. That's 30 cubic feet, 30 cubic yards of material that I had to remove. At $100 a cubic yard, which is, according to Doug's guess and mine too, conservatively low, you're looking at paying $3,000 to haul away the soil before you replace that in that hole, in addition to the tank. And the state will require that you do that. It's not something that I'm going to require, the board's going to require. We would, if the state didn't, perhaps. Thankfully, the state's taking that burden off our shoulders. So the risk of having a home heating oil tank in the ground goes up every year as it gets older and potentially can leak. But I think I've outlined fairly accurately the downside risk on that.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
How is it determined if there's been contamination? That's not clear. I mean, is this kind of, the fire chief going to make this test, or?
This is not an area that I am familiar with. Doug informs me that the first step is that on removal of a tank, they inspect the area from which it was removed. If there's any visible staining, and of course any visible odors, then they go at it in more detail. And so the first tip-off is a visual inspection, and then it may require further testing as well.
Thank you.
If I could just make it's occurred to me another place where we are more stringent than the state, and I wanted to get back to that question that made on.
Sure, go ahead.
We also require monitoring wells around storage areas where there are hazardous materials stored, and we place them in ways that we think will pick up any leak from a tank, and we place them more densely in more environmentally sensitive areas. I think that that's probably an area where we at least have control and try to be stringent, maybe not more stringent than the state, but look after the interests of the town of Acton. And that's another thing that's prohibited in this bylaw, as it was in the old one, for that matter.
Mr. Flood.
Bill Flood, South Acton, Main Street. I'm concerned about the practicalities that are involved as I read that storage of more than 50 gallons or 50 pounds dry weight of any prepackaged hazardous materials for retail sale. What I'm concerned about is that if I look at any of the hardware stores, if I look at any of the retail stores that are selling things like oven cleaners, Drano, paint thinner, paint removers, paint, you get up to 50 pounds or 50 gallons awfully quick. It means to me that either you will have to issue a rather large blanket permit which says you can keep 4,222 gallons of stuff in your store, and that's fine, or you turn a blind eye to it and don't worry about it, or everybody is at least technically in violation. I can't imagine a retail store that can get by with 50 gallons of any of these things, particularly in aggregate. And I certainly don't have any trouble getting up to 50 pounds or 50 gallons, either one of some very, very common things which are in any retail store that I do business with, and I'm going to be very upset if I have to get a permit to buy, to have a permit to buy a gallon of paint thinner.
Let me reconnoiter with 1 minute with another board member. My memory is confirmed, and also we do intend to permit any of the larger retailers that meet this criterion. For example, Purity Supreme has already come to us and obtained a permit because they store a quantity of oil, motor oil, for sale in their store. And it is in excess of the 50 gallons. It's not all out in front, but it's there. And I don't see any reason not to permit and control the storage of 50 gallons of paint stripper, which may contain toluene, methylethyl ketone, other things that, if released into the environment, would be dangerous.
Gentleman at the front.
Michael Case again, High Street. Is your abnormal loss amount more stringent than the state's?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
I agree with Mr. Flood. He said it's very easy to get up to 50 gallons of any household cleaner, bleach, alcohol, whatever. All of those that he mentioned were controlled. If somebody spills less than a Dixie cup of that material, if you calculate out 0.05% times 50 gallons, come out with less than a Dixie cup of material. How do you intend to control that? How do you intend to have people even report that?
Okay, I'll answer that in two parts.
It's an awful small amount for...
I know. Let me answer that in two parts. In writing a bylaw like this, you have to cover the waterfront. In Acton, there are stores in underground tanks of 10,000 gallons of methyl ethyl ketone and toluene, and 0.05% of that is 5 gallons lost into the ground. So we do want to control to that level. And smaller levels, there's a point at which it's not feasible to have a report of a loss. And that is why, in that definition, it says, unless such limit is undetectable, in which case the Board of Health shall set the limit. We're trying to get the largest quantity we can, and as we look at the individual permit applications, if we know, and in conference with the applicant, he can demonstrate that a level is just not, that level is not feasible, then being reasonable people, we will try to set what we think is a reasonable level of protection for the town without being unreasonable to the person, the applicant.
Why didn't you do it before you wrote the bylaw? I think there's a lot of openness here, and there are a lot of cases where you're going to really hurt business in the town. You're going to force a lot of people to either store mass quantities, so if they spill a can of motor oil, it won't be part of the bylaw, or you're going to force them out. What's to stop Dairy Supreme from storing 100,000 gallons of motor oil, so if they spill, I know financially there is, but you don't set any limits. You're setting percentage, and people can get around that. They can work with this bylaw and get around it. I think it needs more work before you really put it into effect.
Okay.
Mr. Schlag.
I'm concerned again. I just have the feeling that this bylaw is going to not be practically enforceable. I think that the amount of manpower that would be required to do the thorough job that would have to be done, not only at the town level, but I can see the stores having to run detailed inventories of what they have on their shelves in order to be sure that they're not in violation. Somebody's going to pay for that. And I'm reluctant to be in a position to say that that's what we want them to do. I think we're after some kind of reasonable approach to this. I can't believe that we want to be able to identify every 5 gallons worth of oven cleaner that's at the supermarket. If you start looking carefully at it, you say, well, you've got to include all of the detergents. You don't want your kids eating detergents. You've got to include all of the bleach. You've got to include, you name it. You don't want them to drink a bottle of vanilla. Maybe vanilla is a dangerous material. And I don't see the definitions here that tell me what you're talking about. I think the thing will go crazy. I think the net effect will be that the bylaw will be largely ignored until such time as we have some kind of an event in which something is definitely spilled, something is dropped, at which point we now have a piece of paper and we can say, hey, buddy, you were in violation. Bang. But the rest of the way, it will just go down the road because the Board of Health and the town does not have the money to enforce it.
Let me make comments to that in a number of areas. I think the definitions are that they are there, and that they are as accurate as definitions for a bylaw can be. They list out federal, state requirements or definitions. They have the same definition that is in the current bylaw incorporated in addition to the federal and state definitions. And I think that the definitions are as precise and as inclusive as definitions can be in something that has to cover so wide a category of materials as hazardous materials. As to enforcement and the town's ability to do it, we were faced with that same problem when we took on the present bylaw. We established a beachhead. We hit the largest. We went after and got permitted the largest storers of hazardous materials in the town. In addition, the bylaw was promulgated widely enough that we had people voluntarily come to us. Purity Supreme did. Lots of other people do. Various town departments, as they've become aware of conditions, will let us know, and we begin the process of controlling hazardous materials and permitting as is required. I submit the job will never be done because the inventory of hazardous materials in Acton will change. People come in, they leave. But I submit that not doing anything is unacceptable. That you have to start somewhere, you have to have a clear vision of where you're going, and you have to then have a group of people who will work toward that goal consistent with what is written, applying it sensibly, and